A very special guest today. I have been a fan of Will Straughan's for years. The first time we met, I was in an audience and Will was on stage. And I started listening to his band and got some of his CDs. So I've always been a music fan of yours. So it's really nice to have you here, Will, for that. And I know that's not what we're going to talk about today. But how's it going?
Going well, man.
Yeah.
Not playing a ton of music, but I am giving a guitar lesson tonight. I've been doing a weekly thing with a buddy, I think a mutual friend,
Yeah.
who manages like a really famous guitar player. So it's kind of fun to teach this guy.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So not playing a ton of guitar, but still
Yeah.
doing that. It's
Yeah.
good to be connected with you.
Right. It is. Well, so Will's story is kind of cool. Will, school and then college in North Carolina, but then music after college. But the reason that you're here is because now you're a prevention specialist.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's okay with you, I'm going to read your intro, and this will give us some perspective, and then we'll learn some more about your story.
Absolutely.
Will Straughan is the founder and CEO of Soundcheck Prevention Network and has taught substance abuse and prevention education to thousands of young people in over 20 states in the U.S., throughout Europe, Central and South America, and Asia. That's a lot of travel. He utilizes his personal story of addiction and recovery to facilitate dialogue and teach skills that are critical to breaking down stigma surrounding substance abuse. Abuse and addiction flourish in silence and secrecy. And Soundcheck breaks down those barriers by helping teachers, students, and parents become more comfortable starting and maintaining ongoing dialogue with non-judgmental, caring, and health-focused language. You've come a long way since I bought your first CD.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
It's interesting how
Yeah.
my music career, which is really hard. I know you know that, to be a musician. It's incredibly rewarding in ways an outsider may not understand, or even going into music, you might think it's going to be one way, but it's interesting how my music career dovetailed into this career as a prevention specialist, because part of my story is that really throughout college and then throughout my 20s, while I was touring around the world, developed a substance use disorder and eventually became addicted to a number of different drugs, and have been in recovery for 13 years. And about 7 years ago, was introduced to the idea of facilitating prevention conversations in schools.
Right.
And so my music, I still travel a lot. I still put the biggest premium, whether it's as a musician or as a prevention specialist, on reaching a faculty member who's like, I don't know what to do when my kids are struggling. Like, I don't want to break the trust that I have with my advisee, because, and yet we know that substance use is not about being good or bad. It's a health issue. And so we love to, like, it's really magical to be able to facilitate those conversations, because you can actually, prevention is a lot easier than trying to fix addiction. There's no sort of cure for addiction. So that's why I really am inspired by this. And most of the time, faculty, parents, and students are like, thank you for helping us have these conversations.
Right. I mean, it wasn't you were a natural teacher to begin with. Right. And then to be able to combine your life experience with changing the lives of so many people is really amazing. I know you've been facilitating a lot of events virtually. And how's that different from your in-person visits?
Well, I think it's a great question. Everybody's probably gone through this. And I certainly have. In my initial thought was going to be, oh my gosh, how are we going to feel that human connection? I share my story a lot with kids, and and you were actually really helpful in shaping my thinking on this, as you took a deep dive into virtual prevention, is to not think of it as limitations, but what are the new possibilities?
Okay.
One of the things I've noticed about virtual work so far is that, and I think some counselors and therapists have also realized, like, it's actually bringing some more people to the table. And while I can still see you and communicate with you, there's a little bit of a wall that I can still hide behind, and it protects. I'm still able to be open with you, but I don't feel quite as vulnerable or exposed. And so it's an interesting way to communicate. It doesn't bring all of the same attributes and you could say benefits necessarily as in person, but we're looking up the wrong tree if we're trying to make it the same as that. We have new ways to communicate.
Well, are you finding that your clients and your students that you're working with are more honest with you in this setting? Is that because they do is the barrier a wall, or is the barrier give them a little more freedom to express themselves to you?
I think a little bit of both. I think one thing that in general, the goal with this is that once you start talking in a certain way about substance use, about taking care of yourself, everybody's more likely to be like, this is a non-judgmental conversation, which inspires people to speak up.
Right.
But I think you're right. I think there are more ways to participate in conversation and dialogue, even without speaking through something like Zoom, because you can do polls, you can do breakout rooms, people can ask anonymous questions. So you're generating sort of a bubbling cauldron or pot of different ways to communicate. And that's another possibility.
Right. And that's great, because you do use the use of polls. You can really gauge the questions of your audience.
Yes.
Right. And see what questions want to be asked. Wow, that's very cool.
And one other thing to add to that, which, exactly. See what questions people want to ask. There's nothing worse than going into a presentation, and sometimes this is how it goes, but flying blind. Right. And if you're in an auditorium, you can't really pivot that easily. We have to, as performers and as teachers and presenters, but with an online Zoom, just like that, you can pivot. And the most important reason why, or the most important thing that helps with, is that everybody comes away feeling like their issues were addressed rather than being preached to.
Yeah. What are some common questions that you get from faculty advisors and teachers when they're working with their students?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the number one questions is, what do I do? How do I bring the topic up if I'm worried about a particular student? Whether you're working with really young students or college age or professional, you're a mentor to them. There becomes this relationship, and teachers are so wary of asking a personal question that they feel will push that student farther away. And yet what we know is that if you let those problems linger, even if it's just an instinct, then they typically, if there is something going on, substance use kind of flourishes, and those substance abuse can kind of flourish when there's silence and secrecy. And so, so a lot of teachers want to know, how do I bring this topic up? What do I do if I'm concerned about them? Mm-hmm. And then another common question is, well, I don't know anything about this topic. How can I talk about this with my students? Well, yes, you do. Yeah. You manage your health in a certain way. Right. And anytime we come up against a barrier with talking about substance use, just take out those words or drugs or alcohol and just talk about health and maintaining your health, because substance use is a health issue, really. Okay. Right. And do you think, I guess the way that I'm interpreting that is like the teachers and advisors are asking for your permission as a professional to ask the question, right? Because they're coming to you with a question like, I don't know how to ask the question. And you're saying, yeah, you do. You just ask the question. Asking about personal health. Right. Right. Yeah. Start that particular way. I mean, right. And then as an advisor or mentor is like, how's your work going? How are you managing your well-being and your health? Right. I've noticed that your performance has gotten a lot better. Like, you're really turning in great writing. Like, are you sleeping well? And so, being there in that way allows for a student, if they are ever concerned about a health issue, maybe depression, it may be something else, it may be substance use, like, this teacher gets me. Right. And so you don't have to necessarily be a professional addiction therapist to be a support and to model healthy behaviors. Right. I mean, are there signs that we could look for as advisors in our students? Sure. Yeah, I think change in behavior or performance. So maybe if you're an academic advisor, then they may their grade might be going down, or they don't seem as engaged. Yeah. Sometimes it may be a lack of interest lack of showing up. Certainly you can sometimes, depending, in person it can be difficult and online as well, but are there physical changes?
Right.
They may show up to a Zoom meeting like this one time.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they're maybe in their late teens or early 20s. So sleep is still sometimes happens a little bit later in the day, and they stay up later. But if it's 3 weeks in a row where you feel like something's off, then that's a time to check in.
Right.
So parents ask this a lot too, like, what if I'm worried? Trust your instincts. It's not going to hurt to kind of bring up the conversation. So I think lack of interest, lack of engagement, fatigue are all some signs that might happen.
Yeah. And so what about on a personal note? We've all been going through this chapter of our global history together, the pandemic. And so I'm sure it's been an opportunity for a lot of people to go down a path that's less healthy, right? What do I do? What does one do if we're concerned about ourselves? Mm-hmm. Right? What if I'm worried about my own behavior, and I'm not thinking about it in that way because I decompress at the end of the day with a bottle of wine, right? Or I decompress at the end of the day with 2 bottles of wine, right? And that, and maybe somebody listening to this right now is like, oh, that's me, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what is a step for, what would you advise someone listening to this conversation? It sounded like I was going to say, what would you advise me? But what would you advise me to do, right?
Right, if that were you. Yeah. And that's a really common question. And sometimes it doesn't have to be a bottle of wine. Somebody could just be fed up with the fact that they put their kids to bed, or they finish their grading papers or something, and then their regular routine is 2 glasses of wine. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's a huge issue. It may not be at all. Yeah. But I think one thing that's really important is to honor the fact that you may have recognized that your brain or your body is causing you to think twice about this. And so if you have any kinds of concerns, you're not feeling like you're functioning optimally, or you feel a little bit dependent on a substance for relaxing or for socializing, it is completely okay to go, hey, at least I recognize that, and to be pretty compassionate with yourself, and then to say, you know what, if this is simply about health and not about whether I have a problem, because you might not have a problem, then why don't I just do like a very simple assessment? And so there's online resources for a quick assessment, and it's a lot easier to be honest with yourself that way. If you're like, hey, I feel like something might be off, I'm going to check this out. And I might put a system in place to where I can go talk to somebody or find a strategy to give myself something else to do. So I think that's really important. Right. But I'll also say that, in the spirit of prevention, that one thing that we've been working on, so I have a small staff and I have an intern, and at the beginning of every week we meet for 30 minutes or an hour. Yeah. And usually my first or last question is, what is your self-care goal for the week? Oh. And I think in the same sort of vein of compassion, and I share mine, I'm the first one. I'm like, I'll go first. And mine this week in particular has been to be more mindful with my eating, because I tend to be, in COVID, I'm single, I live alone. So I tend to, I've developed this relationship with food that's feels a little obsessive. So I'm trying to take care of my diet a little bit more. Yeah. And that's just for this week. And then last week it was managing my sleep better, which I did by meditating 5 minutes before bed. Prevention is not about perfection. It's just about it's a practice. Right. And so that's what I think, self-compassion and kind of just implementing things that every week that are kind of achievable goals.
Well, I think that's just great advice for anybody to ask their team, especially as an advisor. Like that question, what are you doing this week? What are your self-care goals this week? Right? It doesn't take a whole lot of time, but it really sets that sort of we're all gonna think about it, right? We're all gonna think about it. If you're a student activities group or if you're student government, that should be a part of a weekly meeting. You do it because you're a prevention specialist, right? So you're actively thinking about the folks that you work with and you want them to be healthy. We're not always thinking about that, I think, in higher ed. We're thinking about the stuff we got to do, the stuff we got to accomplish, goals to achieve, but to slow down a little bit and to ask your students deliberately, like, what are you doing this week to take care of yourself? It's a great question. So thanks for sharing. Thanks.
I know you're welcome. And I just, there's two things I want to add.
Yeah.
If you have one advisee or a group of students and you ask that question and you share what you're doing.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, it doesn't even, regardless of whether you are an alcohol user or think you have a problem or anything like that. Most adults who use alcohol don't have a problem. So we never shame anything like that.
Yeah.
But by asking that question to your students or sharing what you do, you've just opened up a dialogue, and you're also modeling that you're working on these things too. And I had this one teacher I worked with one time, and he was worried about his kids because they were vaping, and vaping had become a growing trend, and it still is. And so he wanted to address it with them, but he had struggled with nicotine use since he was a teenager.
Okay.
So he went up to them and he was like, look, I want to address this with you guys because I care about you. But I also want to let you know, this has been a struggle for me. I've had to hide it as your teacher over the years. And he said, I'm making a commitment to quit. And I think he actually was able to achieve that. I haven't checked in with him in a while, but it gave the kids like an ally in this. And this was somebody saying, hey, I'm on the same page. I'm not perfect too. So sometimes substance use can come into your own self-care goals, but be careful about that. I wouldn't necessarily, if I were, no matter what my mentor relationship was or my advice, if I was an advisor, I don't know that I'd be like, hey, I'm cutting back on my drinking with my, but here are the things I do to take care of myself.
Yeah.
People don't brag enough. College students, grad students don't often hear about how sober their friends got.
Right.
When in reality, a lot of those kids are working hard.
Yeah.
Not always partying. And so anytime we can share those things and normalize those things that all of us are really working hard to do.
Yeah.
Like just to get our work done. That is really encouraging to younger people who are looking for models.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
I can talk a ton, dude.
I mean, there's a benefit to just talking about health benefits. Right? There's a huge benefit to consciously incorporating it into your dialogue. So I think that's important that you shared that. But let's talk about your rock and roll, because I am still a fan, and you've had a bunch of different bands over the years, and you're still writing a lot of songs. You said you haven't been playing a lot lately, but you're teaching, and you've been performing sometimes virtually as well. Mm-hmm. I guess I guess I want you to perform.
I knew you were working out to something like that. You're so sneaky, and yet I knew that you were sneaking the whole time.
Yeah, the whole reason that you're here is secretly not about your profession. It's all about me. It's all about me and the fan that I am. You've written a lot of songs. You've been in, anyway. Is there a song that means a lot to you that you want to share a story about and play for us?
Yeah, I will, and I'd love to. Thank you very much. Yeah. And I have one that I kind of wrote when I was getting out of treatment, and then I have another one that was, I'm trying to think which one's shorter and more to the point. Do you remember that one I played, like called These Old Chains?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll play that, because this is like if you're feeling that, like it's time, I need to make a change, but it's hard. Yeah. It's hard to be like, to take those steps sometimes.
Right.
But I think listening to that instinct and then maybe having someone help you, like, hey, what would be a good way to make a change? Help me, Jason. Like, I've told you about this.
Right.
And my conversation with you has inspired me because you just told me something you did. You're not eating gluten. I'm gonna take that with me. So anyways, maybe that's getting too philosophical about a folk song, but I was teaching this 80-year-old woman. She was learning to play the steel guitar, which is one of my instruments. And first of all, that was inspiring. I was like, you're starting this as an 80-year-old?
Yeah.
And she was this like Zen master. And she started a whole like Zen retreat place up here in Nashville, North Carolina. And she had this cabin in the woods.
Yeah.
And I told her, I was like, I'm really plateauing right now. Like I'm not achieving anything. I was sober and have been since then, but I need to change. And she goes, well, look, I've got this cabin. Here's the key. You can have it and go anytime you want. And so I wrote a song called These Old Chains, and I'll play that.
Oh, great. Yeah, we forgot to mention that you're in Asheville, North Carolina. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty.
That's a pretty place
I love
to be.
Asheville.
Yeah.
As a non-beer drinker, there's lots of choices for that here, and cider, but it's a healthy feeling.
Yeah.
City. The Chocolate Lounge is kind of my place to go sometimes for a really big treat. But then the mountains, that I go trail running a lot.
Yeah.
And the food is for a city this size, and I've traveled all around the world doing this work. The food here is something I look forward to coming back to all the time. So
that's cool.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we should all plan a trip to Asheville. Yes, we hear you fine.
Get a little bit of this. This is a guitar made here in Nashville, actually.
Oh, cool.
Maybe I'll move it down a little bit so I don't yell into the microphone. I also love baseball, so this has a couple of baseball references. So. I think it's time to make a change, to pick up a step and improve my range, break down the basics of my swing, make it smoother, make it sweeter, make it really ring. Yes, it's time to make a change. When I start to feeling strange, I'm begging you, may I exchange this old hammer, these old shackles, these old chains. I'm gonna find what I'm looking for on some note high up on heaven's door. When it's time to go back for more, help yourself, here's the key, you gotta let yourself in. When it starts to rain, coming all sideways and insane, like a runaway train out of nowhere, and there's no way to explain. When you wake up, you must choose to let the sunshine kiss the blue in your Monday morning shoes. You will walk out with a Sunday morning view. You're gonna find what you're looking for on some note high up on heaven's door. When it's time to go back for more, help yourself, here's the key, you gotta let yourself in.
You see why I'm a fan?
Yeah.
That's such a pretty song. That is such a pretty song.
Thanks, man.
We're gonna have to put one of the, the link to your music in your bio on the page when this goes up.
Yeah, absolutely.
What a treat! You just played for me, but the thousands and millions of people that are gonna watch this video when it goes. This, maybe I'll just post that, just you and me, It's great.
Post away.
Post away. Yeah. So, hey, do you bring, you with Soundcheck prevention, it clearly has a musical reference. And I know that, I mean, if a school brings you, do you, like, is the guitar with you when you come? Or is that something that you've avoided? Or is it something you're interested in doing? Like, where does the guitar play into your prevention programs?
Well, I'll tell you, and Soundcheck is definitely a musical reference, but you gave me a talkable moment.
Yeah.
When I was looking for a name that would be salient to people and welcome this conversation rather than drugs are bad or dare not to do them, I met with a bunch of college students and grad students.
Yeah.
And they gave me 200 names, and I had them present them to me, why they did them, and they created logos and things like that.
Yeah.
And we chose the one Soundcheck, and the woman who presented that name said, well, she said, you were a musician. She said, you wanted to be something that we could all maybe relate to. But she said, I'm in recovery from addiction, and I just wish my teachers and my parents had talked to me more about this when I was growing up. She said, I don't know if it would have prevented me totally from becoming addicted, but it would have made me more likely to reach out. So that's where that name came from.
Right.
And usually what I do is actually in the classroom or online, I'll just leave my guitar or my amp in the background.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kids would be like, what do you play guitar?
Uh-huh.
Or because if I sometimes start with it or I tell them I'm a musician, they kind of like, they can be skeptical.
Yeah.
And I am a little bit shy about something, so I might not lead with that.
Right.
But when I do tell my story, sometimes I'll incorporate it right into the story, or at the end of the presentation, I'll be like, anybody, you want to hear a song?
Right.
I'm always surprised, no matter where I am in the world, what everybody's sort of belief systems are, the diversity, the nature of the particular group. Yeah. When you stop and offer a handcrafted sort of song or performance or that type of communication, kids remember it.
Yeah.
And they're just grateful for, they don't judge it in terms of that's not what I have on Spotify. Right. They're like, that's really cool that you did that. And again, it's another thing that makes kids feel makes them feel heard. It makes them feel like they're participating.
Yeah. I mean, you're sharing something that you created. You're putting yourself out there. You're putting yourself out there. It's vulnerable in a way, because in your lyrics, you're admitting to, in that song, that, I acknowledge that something's not been great, and it's time for a change. Right. So not only is it the melody and the music, but the words in that particular song. So I can see that, and it brings people together.
Yeah.
Right. The performance of it, the shared live experience brings people together.
I think you hit on something that's actually the most important piece, because our goal with Soundcheck was to go way beyond presenting just the facts about alcohol, marijuana, and other substances. Yeah. That's what it is. I mean, they're scientific facts, and then there's some myths, but it was to back up and to not just talk about, but to make available opportunities for kids to feel connected and to experience things that increase their resilience. Because we know that if their bucket of health is a lot more full than their unhealthy choices, which is a struggle for all of us, they're more likely to make healthy choices. And what you just said is that experience in the classroom or in an auditorium is special for kids. So it's there's a shared experience. So thank you for making that point.
Yeah. I mean, I have this vision of you on stages on colleges across the campus, sharing a message and a concert. Like that's as your manager.
Yes. Well, I'd love to go open up for you, man, and
stop it.
Do some co-bills or something, but
that'd be fun.
That's really important. I appreciate you asking that particular question, because music, it is an experience, and those are major factors. That how often does a young person, or really any of us, have the opportunity, either in a small group or in an auditorium, to have your live music, you know, like, and I think that I will say, like, in this, Bob Dylan said this, or Woody Guthrie, I can't remember which one it was, but there's nothing more powerful than one person with their guitar. I think that is it's just a powerful symbol. And a lot can be communicated through that.
Right. Yeah. You make a great connection with your, so your experience as a performer, I'm going to continue this conversation. Your experience as a performer and with crowds and with audiences has probably made you a much more aware facilitator.
Yes.
Would you agree with that? Yeah.
I would. It's interesting, Jason, because yes, I think as a performer, what it really helped me with in the classroom or in an auditorium was, ways to connect, like, and how important that is, and that it's so much about sometimes the banter between the songs, or the little, maybe messing up on stage. And it's the same thing in a classroom, is being human.
Yeah.
Can also be the vehicle through which kids get the message.
Yeah.
Or adults.
Yeah.
But what I really learned was, once I was trained as a facilitator.
Yeah.
And trained really rigorously from a really top prevention organization in the world.
Yeah.
Then I went back to music.
Yeah.
And was much better at managing stage banter and controlling the pace of a show, and just being there with the audience more mindfully than being lost in your head. Like, this song's about, and so coming back to music, I learned a lot as a facilitator to enrich that experience. I found it a lot more fun, actually.
Right. Oh, that's very cool. That's very cool.
What about you? Like, when you're always a performer, and then you became, you wove in or folded in your ability to connect, your ability to have a really wonderful but connective presence in front of a large people or large group or small group, and then to start being an inspirational speaker or weaving in those really important messages. What was the synergy there? Like, did you come back? Does that help your music?
Yeah, it was very organic, and thanks for asking me a question in your interview. I very organically, but I think, I got a degree in education, and I always wanted to be, and I'm a camp counselor, and I have been, like, last summer was my 30th year at the summer camp, and so I've always sort of accepted the role of at least having one little bit of advice, maybe, not considering myself like I definitely think that when the first time I ever gave a keynote speech, I had imposter syndrome, right? Because I had been a musician and an entertainer for so many years. But it definitely, being an entertainer makes me a better facilitator. And once I started speaking on stage and not having the guitar, it definitely made my concerts better.
Yeah.
Because I was better at telling a story and making a point, or my timing was better. Yeah, they've helped. They've both helped. They're mutually beneficial. Yeah. So I mean, it's interesting. If we met somebody in a band now, they would say, hey, you know what you should do? Go get certified as a prevention specialist, because your rock and roll show is going to be that much better.
Yeah.
You're right.
Go learn how to speak publicly. But I want to say one more thing, Jason, because it's been helpful to me, but there are not a lot of people like you, because who have that ability to be so generous with your personality and your energy, and letting so many people into that energy that you do have, which is really inclusive. And I think if I were an audience member as a young person, or if you were my camp counselor, those are the kind of people that we're looking to for guidance and for feeling included, for having fun, and for bringing tools like music. And that, as an adult and as somebody who's started my own organization and consulted with you along the way, you gave me a lot of confidence, and a lot of your energy rubbed off on me not overthinking it and to really focus on the skills that I do have. And so I think it's important you're a perfect person for this particular role, but also it's really contagious even for people who don't necessarily have the natural type of personality or skill set that you have. So it's really a unique gift to bring those things out of other people. And so you're clearly doing the right thing. And as indicated or evidenced by, how many people were in this virtual events idea community one time? 2, and now it's like 20,000 or whatever. I mean, it's amazing. So thanks for giving us all permission to participate.
Oh, thanks, Will. I appreciate that. I do think everybody on campuses and at schools has that side. And I was in another interview yesterday with an improv, a keynote speaker who's also an improv guy. And I think one of the things that I've learned is the willingness to not be perfect, to try stuff that doesn't work, right? And be okay with that, with the tripping and the falling and the getting back up and be like, I think maybe that's something that added to the confidence just to try. Just, this is something we could do. We should just try it. Let's just try it. Like, I think with the virtual events page and even with these interviews, I've never been an interviewer before.
Yeah.
This is not something that I knew that I could do. And I'm really enjoying it. I'm really enjoying these conversations. I really am. And I know that because of it, it'll grow into more and more interviews, and because we have to at some point, and you did this at some point where you're like, well, now I've learned a bunch of stuff. What am I going to do with it? Am I going to take it home with me and put it in a trunk? Mm-hmm. Or am I going to share what I've learned? Am I going to be able to learn more? Right? And you and I think hopefully this, if all of this makes it into the final, if this makes it where other people are watching it, it's just your trunk's never complete. You're not done. You're not a finished product.
Right.
And keep staying open to all the possibilities.
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks for saying those things. It wasn't supposed to be about me. It's supposed to be about you, but you're me. Well, here's the problem.
You can steal a couple clips, man, and be like, have somebody complimenting you. There's nothing wrong with that.
This is not a problem. Is that you do what you do because it's not about you.
Yeah.
Right? You're doing what you do because you're not a musician who wants to get more likes on YouTube anymore. You're a self-confident performer and songwriter who now you're more concerned about the audience, right? You're actually more aware. You don't do what you do because you want to get more followers. You do what you do because you care about the people who might follow you.
Yeah.
And I think it's a big leap. But I think all of us in the evolution or our stages of development in life, like, we're babies, we're very self-centered, we're teenagers, the world revolves around us, and through our adolescence it's very me, and now we're not me. Yeah. And I feel lucky that I was able to I was me, through college, because I was putting flyers all over campus so people would come see my band, right?
Well, I think you're right how that we definitely evolved that way. And then you hope for the human species that you do get to a point where you're like, all right, I need to give now.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I'm reading this book by David Brooks, which is really great, called The Second Mountain. And he talks about the first mountain is the me mountain. And the second one is when you really commit. And there's talks about the freedom that you have within the chain, the higher level of freedom you have from the chains of commitment. But like when you make a commitment to your spouse, to your family, to your work, to the mission that you have, those are the things that provide the deepest meaning and most freedom. Whereas when it's all about sort of all the individual choices we can make, like there's such me type choices. But he also makes another point that back in, let's just say our parents' generation, at least mine were born in the 1940s, there was, and other times throughout history, it's like a very community, like it's very much a we time in society. And when the 60s and 70s came around, it became more self-centric, like self-care, and that's all great stuff. But bringing it to today, when you look at the pandemic and how much inequality and how much struggle that has exposed, that not many people already were aware of, but it's so raw that perhaps there's another shift to a more community neighborhood. And it's been really amazing to see human beings all across the board really reach out despite limitations to help other people and to be more connected maybe than ever. Yeah.
I want to read that book.
It's good. He's really good. My mom gave me her copy, and every sentence is underlined, so it's really distracting. She's like,
well, Will, it has been awesome hanging with you today.
You too, Jason.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. I'm excited to see you out there in the world doing this good work. So thanks for being here as part of the Virtual Engagement Summit. And I'm looking forward to many more interviews with you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Jason.